Okay, welcome to El Maestro. My name is Victor Lecce III, and you are with me. Thank you for listening and joining me for the 10th episode of this podcast. We have a great show for you here tonight. It is actually nighttime as I am recording this, and I'm so excited you can join us. We are going to go ahead and try and keep it to that hour. We have been getting ever so closer back to the hour-long podcast for the last couple of weeks. Last week we were at an hour and 10 minutes, and today I'm going to strive as hard as possible to get us to that hour, which means I need to get on with the items of the show so that way then I can get right into the content for you. So, we're going to begin the show as we always do with the items that are necessary, and let's begin with where you can find me. You can find me on Facebook. You can follow me at Victor Lecce III. My last name is spelled Lecha. You can also follow us and interact with us on El Maestro Podcast on Facebook as well. You can also find the El Maestro Podcast on IG and also TikTok. And then finally, you can that's where you would find the highlight reels. And if you want to go ahead and listen to the podcast, you can find us on Spotify or on YouTube. So excited to have you here with us today because I'm going to give an exciting announcement. I have been letting you know that we were going to do our first interview, and I had let you know that interview is booked, and it is. But now I can go ahead and give you the actual name of who I'm going to be interviewing. His name is Eric Smith, a really good friend of mine. And I have this blurb I'm going to read to you. Eric Smith is a California-based photographer and creative producer of Pastiche Magazine, an independent photo magazine. In his early 20s, he pursued a career in journalism while working several odd jobs to pay the rent. Now, almost a decade later, Eric's on a different path, one that aligns with the cost of living here in California, which, as we know, is very expensive. Eric Smith oversees state and federally funded remodels, and historical restorations as a construction project manager. So the reason why I picked Eric to be our first interview is because I think it's going to bring up a lot of issues that we all are dealing with right now. If you're part of Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z, we're going to talk about the cost of living crisis, not only in California, but it is really seeming like globally. But in California, it's entirely exacerbated. We're going to talk about also, Eric is actually a father. And we're going to talk about, his decision with him and his partner to have a child. Because we know right now that millennials and Gen Zs, perhaps maybe more Gen Z, they're having less and less children because of how expensive it is. And also because of the state of the world affairs. Also going to talk about, as you can hear from that blurb, him trying to continue to pursue his dream while living in an area that's incredibly exorbitant and expensive. For many of us, as I am right now, I'm doing this podcast, I've written a book, but it's all stuff that I'm doing on the side. I can't devote my attention to it full time. Not that I don't love my job. As you know, I'm a crisis clinician. I work in the mobile crisis field. I don't know if I actually have told you my position before. I think I might have just said I worked mental health. But the point I'm trying to make is I love my job, but I could never really pursue this full time because of how expensive it is. And I know he's experiencing that as well, as was mentioned in the blurb, and I'm sure others as well too. So I think it's going to be an exciting interview. He's also a very engaging and witty person, so I'm excited to bring that to you. So that's one of the things off the top. So that'll be our first interview, and we'll be doing interviews once a month. The other thing I wanted to bring up to you before we start getting to the content, as always, is just to remind you all that I suffer from ADHD. That's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And all that really means is that sometimes I have difficulty bringing in into my consciousness the content that I want to bring to you. I may mix things up. I may forget things. And in that moment, I'll just say, you know what, I'm having an ADHD moment. And I may actually present maybe a detail that's incorrect or inaccurate. You don't have to worry about that because the following show, I have a segment which is at the top of the show called Corrections, where I go ahead and correct whatever mistakes that I made in the previous podcast. And having said that, then, without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and get into corrections before we get into the content for today's podcast. So I actually have two corrections, and I couldn't find. I was listening to the show, and just to let you know, I listened to the podcast afterwards. A lot of times when I'm driving in the car, and I'm like, oh, there's a correction, but I don't write it down. So I might have to think of a better method to do this, because normally I just think I remember it, but if I have ADHD, I probably want to write it down. Don't want to write it down while I'm driving, so I'm gonna have to set some time aside to do that. Because I've forgotten what the second correction is. But I'll bring it to you in the next podcast. Again, it wasn't anything big. It wasn't major. It wouldn't change the actual heart of the show or thesis or topic of the podcast. But still, it's just something to go ahead and correct. But the one correction that I did remember is we talked a lot last week about President Trump deploying the National Guard into California due to the ICE raid protests. We talked about how the communities and those who were protesting felt that ICE was exceeding their authority as they weren't respecting due process for those immigrants who do not have a criminal conviction, who are not engaging in any criminal activity, yet ICE is picking them up anyways if they have maybe an asylum claim. So there's all of these, stories and allegations going on. And I do believe that there is some truth to it, because there are people, as I mentioned to you last week, those who are even are supporting President Trump and were supporting President Trump are not questioning whether to do that. Last week I talked about Representative Garcia. I couldn't remember her first name. It's Ileana Garcia. She works in the state legislature in Florida. She was the co-founder for Latinos for Trump. And she was saying how, they've been really subjected to inhumane treatment. So, and there's many others who are saying this as well. But to get to the correction was that I had said that there were riots occurring, and that's why the National Guard was deployed. Well, I guess I should really, it's more of a clarification. There has been looting. There has been some destruction of property. But perhaps it doesn't rise to the level of riot. And here's where it gets difficult, because it's like, how do you define a riot? Well, those 20 businesses who got looted would say that there was rioting, correct? But it doesn't rise to the level of, say, the Los Angeles riots or the Rodney King riots in the 90s, if you were around during that time. If not, go ahead and Google it or YouTube it and look it up. It was probably the worst riots that Los Angeles has suffered, besides the Watts riots in the 60s. And in those riots, in the Los Angeles Rodney King riots, it was over 3,100 businesses looted. So you understand that there's this huge discrepancy. But, just to go ahead and to make that clarification, when I said riot, I didn't want you to get this idea that it was to the level of the Rodney King riots, but there was still destruction of property. There was still looting of businesses occurring. But I guess there was also peaceful protests occurring as well, too. And the reason why I want to bring that up, and we're going to start there, is because it brings up this question again, like we were talking about last week. Did President Trump need to deploy the National Guard? And it's really going to be a constitutional question. As I talked to you last week, or as I mentioned to you last week, he used the Insurrection Act, and there's going to be this debate within the courts on whether he had the jurisdiction to do that. And I don't really want to make this into a legal podcast. There are those who feel like, yes, he needed to do that before it got out of hand. And there are those who are like, no, it did not rise to that level yet. He did not have to invoke the Insurrection Act. He could have let the governor decide whether to deploy the National Guard. So I'm going to leave that to the courts to decide. But just to give you an update on that, a lower federal court said that Trump exceeded his authority, exceeded his mandate, and he could not actually use or, I don't want to say seize, but I guess take over the National Guard and deploy them without the governor's permission. An appeals court went ahead and reinstated I guess that was an injunction by the lower court, and the appeals court went ahead and overturned the injunction while it's going through the court process. And so the National Guard remains under President Trump's command. And we'll see when it gets to the Supreme Court, because that's where it's going. And to be honest with you, I don't know. And everyone's going to have their opinions on this. But that's why this isn't really an opinion matter. It's going to be a legal matter. And those who've gone to law school, as the Supreme Court has, and have clerked in all of them, and they're going to go ahead and figure it out. I do, though, want to bring up a real point, a distinct point, an important point that really bothers me. Putting aside the National Guard issue, and before I get off that topic to the next point, let's actually put a bow on the National Guard issue, because some people will say the National Guard should not have been deployed, and some are saying they should. Well, let's speak to someone who would have let's hear from someone who would have an idea about that, and that would be the chief of the Los Angeles Police, Chief McDonald, and he said plainly, "We don't need the National Guard, and they're not here to help us right now. They're here to facilitate what the federal agencies are doing on the immigration front." He emphasized that local law enforcement hadn't requested federal troops and weren't anywhere near needing them to handle the protests. So, I mean, you can have a debate as to whether President Trump should have activated the Guard or not, but here's someone, it's in law enforcement, who's very in tune with the city. He's the chief of Los Angeles Police Department, and he was saying we were nowhere near that level to go ahead and bring in the Guard. So I'll leave it up to you, but I would definitely say he'd be someone who would know. I mean, he would be someone who would know. And it's interesting how it got to that point, because President Trump was making comments about how the police were overwhelmed and how, they were thankful that he went ahead and deployed the National Guard. And so that's how the Los Angeles police chief, Mr. Chief McDonald, went ahead and commented on that by saying we were nowhere near that level. So, I mean, I leave that to you to make a decision. But again, I'm going to say this is the chief of the Los Angeles Police Department. I mean, he's obviously very aware and intelligent enough and attuned to these matters to know when we would need the National Guard, when he would go ahead and call the governor for that. So, but, what really for me, the real issue is, and I mean, don't get me wrong, that still is an issue. And if it were to me, I would defer to, those who know the area well enough, those who work with the communities on a daily basis. So I would defer to, the chief of the Los Angeles Police Department before deploying the Guard. I would. And that's just me, right? And that's probably a lot of others too. So, but irrespective of that issue, what is really under my skin is why in the heck was the Marines deployed? There were 700 Marines deployed into Los Angeles for these apparent ICE raid protests. And again, you might say riot, but definitely not to the level of the Rodney King riots. When the Marines and the National Guard were deployed in the Rodney King riots, as I was mentioning to you, there was 3,100 businesses that had been looted and had burned down. I mean, the city was in flames. They had to get control. And so, I mean, that was definitely a moment where you did deploy, President George Bush did deploy the Guard and Marines. There is no reason. This did not rise to the level to deploy the Marines. And honestly, I feel like it's President Trump trying to make a statement to say, you know what, I'm going to use all the force within my power to go ahead and show you that I am actually in control, that I am the commander-in-chief. And I can just be honest with you, that's not the way to use the military. That's not the way to use our armed services. I mean, really what you're doing is placing them in a position where something unfortunate could happen. There is no reason for them to be there. Law enforcement's trained for this. The riot police is trained for this. The National Guard is trained for this. You bring in the military when things are really out of control, like they were during the Rodney King riots. Not for 20 businesses that have been looted. No offense to those businesses. But you don't need the Marines for 20 businesses that have been looted and, have had some property damage. So it really... there's just these concerns, right, in regards to, for the most part, it was people exercising their freedom of speech, their First Amendment rights. And, we have to remember that is a sacred, sacred right that we have here in this country. For example, that doesn't exist in Russia. It doesn't exist in Cuba. We could go down the list of countries where there isn't freedom of speech. So we have to be weary and leery when we see actions that could possibly threaten that. We do have that. It's one of our most sacred amendments and one of our most sacred rights. So I'm a little, I'm just concerned about that, and I think others are too. Again, with regards to the National Guard, I mean, maybe it shouldn't have. And, the courts are going to go ahead and resolve that. But there is no reason why the Marines should have been deployed whatsoever. It was just a way to go ahead and to try and show how much force is available. And this is where people say we're worried that Trump is looking like he is enamored with authoritarian tactics. Because that's what, authoritative regimes do. Now, I'm not saying that was what was happening this time. But if that continues to happen, then there's a pattern, and we need to be concerned about it. We need to make sure there are protocols in place just not to have the Marines deployed when there's citizens just protesting or people just protesting. And to be honest with you, I don't think the Marines really signed up for that. So they're not there to go ahead and to be used as just a statement of force, or to go ahead and to show, how to go ahead and to show like how strong you can really be, or how powerful you want to look like you are. And that's what it looked like to me. It looked like showmanship. The final thing I'm going to say before we get off this topic is that, again, there's these reports that ICE is exceeding their authority, and I think those are going to be things for, courts to figure out, go ahead and whatever channels there are to go ahead and see if ICE is really doing that. And I think all I will say to this is I'm going to say, I believe it was Teddy Roosevelt who said it, and if not, I guess I'll bring it up in corrections next week. But no one's above the law. And those who are entrusted in enforcing the law, are asked to more, I would say, to go ahead and make sure that they are doing it diligently and appropriately. I would just like to go ahead and have everyone remember, and it seems kind of silly to say it this way, but it is a fantastic quote, and it's very true. What Uncle Ben told Peter Parker in the Spider-Man movies, and I'm sure probably in the comics as well too, that with great power comes great responsibility. And I think I will leave that there and move us from there to another hot topic. And before I do that, I forgot to bring up the funny stories. We do have some funny stories, and I am going to get to them. We have two. I get back on thinking, do I want to call these funny stories or culture pieces or quirky stories? Whatever. We're going to call it our funny segment and just leave it as that. Or our our funny segment, and just leave it there, right? Or a levity segment where we bring some levity into the episode of the podcast. So we have a piece with a man named Cowboy Cody. Yes, you thought the days of those old gunslingers were gone. Well, they are. I mean, I don't know. I actually don't live in, obviously I don't live in the South, and I haven't spent that much time in the South. But I'm wondering, do they give those nicknames to everyone? Like, Cool Hand Luke and Billy the Kid? Well, this individual is from Kentucky, and he has the nickname Cowboy Cody. And he had a little bit of a run-in with a bar, and there's a raccoon involved. So I'll just leave it there, because if you think bar, you think alcohol, and you think someone named Cowboy Cody, what's he doing there? And what is the raccoon all about? That should be enough to whet your appetite. Needless to say, law enforcement was involved. Obviously, we got that part. The second story is, what are people's beliefs when it comes to the paranormal? Dun, 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 dun. I did that horribly. That's like the X-Files. I saw this meme, or maybe JPEG, I'll just say meme, on Reddit. And it was a survey that was done in America for people's paranormal beliefs on things they either strongly agree or they agree on. And let me give you some of the categories. Places can be haunted by spirits. Ancient advanced civilizations such as Atlantis once existed. I feel like I'm in jeopardy. And can I get 400 for aliens have visited Earth in our ancient past? So there's all these categories. I'm not going to give them to you all right now because I want to get back to the content. And we're going to go through with that. And I want to ask you which one you think has the highest percentage in regards to Americans who agree or strongly agree. Is it that places can be haunted by spirits? Is it that aliens have visited Earth in our ancient past? Or is it that some people can move objects with their minds? Oh, we're going to Stranger Things now. For those who have seen that show on Netflix. And if you haven't seen that show on Netflix, what is wrong with you? See it. Now, I have to tell you, I haven't seen the final season yet. And I don't know if that's the final season. I just know the latest season. So let me say that. So now I'm going to move to some really unfortunate developments. I'm sure you know where I'm going to go next. But to be honest with you, they're both really unfortunate developments. One is, I'm going to say them both and then, explain or elaborate more on them later as we continue with the content and with the show. But one, unfortunately, is the assassinations of the Minnesota lawmakers in obviously Minnesota. They both worked for the legislature there, the state legislature. They weren't federal. Not that that matters, but I just wanted to make that distinction. It was Representative Melissa Hortman and Senator John Hoffman. And the other is that Israel has ramped up its actions in the Middle East. And by actions, I mean violence. And I want to make a distinction to say Netanyahu, because I do believe that not all Israelis are really supportive and fond of Netanyahu's actions. As we know, he is facing corruption charges in Israel right now. But Israel attacked Iran on the 12th of June and basically declared war. I don't think they officially did declare war, but when you start bombing a country, what else is that country supposed to think? So, and really escalating tensions in the region. As we know already, we've talked about this in this podcast and previous podcasts, Israel, or let me say Netanyahu, Netanyahu has not looked to diplomacy first. He has looked to the sword first, or the conflict first. Bombing Lebanon, bombing Syria, especially after the Assad regime had fallen. Bashar al-Assad had left Syria, and a new regime is coming into power, and you bomb them. That isn't a way to begin good relations with your neighbor or to start new relations with that neighbor. So bombing Syria, bombing Lebanon, now attacking Iran. We know that in Gaza, they refuse to continue with the stages in the peace process that have been outlined by the United States and the Biden administration. They went ahead and continued the war there, and perhaps just as bad, if not worse, they also are restricting aid, United Nations aid, from getting into Gaza. And of course, that is looking like that's going to cause famine in the region. There have been worries about that. There's starvation going on. The point I'm trying to make to you is that Netanyahu does not seem as if he is seeking peace in the Middle East. Actions speak louder than words. So show me where there is someone who actually is looking for diplomacy and for peace in the region. It doesn't look anything like that. And I'm going to be honest with you. If I was an Israeli, I would be incredibly frustrated. The hostages have been in captivity for far too long. He's not making them a priority. And you might say, well, how can he? Because of Hamas, and they won't agree to this, and they want to go to that, and they won't agree to that. Well, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get to an agreement by continuing the war. You only get to agreement when you do a ceasefire, when you stop and you get to the table, to the negotiating table, and you stay there until you come up with an agreement. Meanwhile, hostages have died there on Netanyahu's watch. I mean, look, when President Ronald Reagan came into office in America, we had a hostage crisis. He got those hostages back home quickly. Unlike Netanyahu. I hesitate to say this because this is a very, what's the word? I guess it could be interpreted as hyperbolic. I'm not meaning it to be hyperbolic. It is definitely incendiary, but I'm going to say it anyways. But it seems as if, let me say it this way. It seems as if whatever military objectives he has a higher priority than bringing the hostages home. You claim that terror attack was one of the worst things that's happened to Israel, which I would agree, but yet you're not putting the effort into bringing those hostages home. Instead, you're continuing the war on Gaza, you're continuing to bomb there, you've bombed Syria, you've bombed Lebanon, and now you have started a war with Iran. Meanwhile, hostages are dying. Your priorities are mixed up, are upside down, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Your first commitment, your first priority are your own citizens. And then you could deal out with what else is going on in the region. But let's talk about why Netanyahu went ahead and attacked Iran. Remember, we had been talking in this podcast, or why they felt like they needed to attack Iran, because I don't think they did. And many are calling it an illegal war. But remember, in the other podcast, we had talked about how the United States and Iran were negotiating on their nuclear program. Well, apparently, Israel was like, we need to attack them now because it is an actual threat to us. We can't allow Iran to have a nuclear bomb. Well, where was Iran's nuclear capabilities? They were at 60% enrichment in regards to uranium enrichment. Just for you to know, to be able to get to a level where they could build bombs, Iran, they would have to have their enrichment, their uranium enrichment, to 90%. That 60 to 90% is a 30% gap. They were nowhere near that level when Israel went ahead and began their attack on Iran. They were nowhere near that level. They didn't have to do that. So, how would they know? How would you know if, for example, Iran was actually getting to 90%? Because that's a good question. How would you know that, right? Here are some ways that you would be able to know that. There is an agency called the International Atomic Energy Agency. And they would be able to tell you if Iran's enrichment had actually gone up to 90%. The other thing is, even if Iran blocks, which is called the IAEA, from actually going into the nuclear facilities, you would be able to, because this is a hotspot, right? So there are a lot of eyes on these nuclear facilities. The United States, Israel, there are a lot of eyes on this. They would know really within, almost immediately. It would be very difficult to conceal this. Detection would likely occur within days to a week, even without IAEA access. So, the point I'm trying to make to you is that there was absolutely no reason for Israel to attack. And especially considering that Iran was in negotiations with the United States. Again, this goes to show how Netanyahu and how he is conducting and managing Israel's affairs is really a destabilizing force in the region. There does not seem to be seeking any diplomacy whatsoever. And what's worse about this is it's trying to get the United States into this war. And I guess I want to, before I go further into the story more, I want to talk to some of the headlines that have come up. President Trump has said that he wants an unconditional surrender of Iran. Now, apparently, we weren't involved in this at all. But come to find out that the United States did let Qatar know. So they did know, and their other partners within the region, they did know that this attack was going to happen. So it wasn't unilateral. It was unilateral in the fact that Israel's just using their army. But in regards to intelligence, the United States definitely knew what was happening. And now President Trump is calling for an unconditional surrender, which, of course, the supreme leader is saying that's not going to happen. And, Trump is saying that he's going to make a decision whether he's going to enter the fray within a week or two, or within 2 weeks. The supreme leader has already said that if the United States enters the war, there's going to be irreparable damage. We need to learn from our history. The last time we entered a war in the Middle East, it was with Iraq. And when that happened, there was a void in Iraq, and that's how ISIS was formed. We need to be very careful about how we proceed here, especially when you consider who you're attempting to ally with. With Netanyahu, He's bombing everyone in the Middle East. He's not coming to the negotiating table in Gaza. I mean, you have to understand that this is a cause and effect, right? A lot of these Arab nations are obviously upset on the treatment of Palestinians. We need to start moving back to a two-state solution with Israel and Palestine. We're nowhere near that. And it appears that as long as Netanyahu is prime minister of Israel, we're never going to be anywhere near that. And so the stability of the world, and especially in the Middle East, is always going to be threatened. It's going to be a tinderbox. So why do you want to go in and ally? Go in and ally with a country who's having a leader who is acting like a loose cannon. Britain has already said, I believe it was Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner, and I believe actually Prime Minister Keir Starmer said it as well, they're not going to join the United States if the United States goes ahead and attacks Iran. So, I guess in a couple of weeks, President Trump's going to make that decision. But this is what is, and it kind of ties into what we were talking about just before about exceeding authority. What I have seen in my lifetime, and this is becoming very, very, disconcerting and worrisome, that before, the only way the president could ever declare war was approval from Congress. And that power has been stripped from Congress. Ever since President George Bush went ahead and maybe there was actually congressional approval for that one. But there had been, I think there was for Iraq. There was. But the point I'm trying to make is there have been, in the modern era, several times where the president has used military force without congressional approval. Now, granted, I think there are times where the president, as the commander-in-chief, does need to do that for security concerns, right? And to go ahead and get congressional approval, it may take too long. But those are in some very rare circumstances. This is not one of them. Iran is nowhere near having a nuclear bomb. Nowhere near. With the monitoring they have, as I told you before, in regards to the IEAE, and even if Iran blocks access to that, and then the eyes that are with our intelligence capabilities, Israel's intelligence capabilities, they would know if that uranium got enriched to like 70% or 80%. You could easily do a strike. You could even, this is how you use diplomacy, saying if you get the 75% enrichment, all bets are off. But there's none of that. So it makes you think, like, what else is going on here? I wanted to bring up, continuing on this topic in regards to why would you align yourself with, even if they are your ally, as one who is acting as such a loose cannon as Netanyahu has? When you have other allies, say, of Israel, there's not that many, by the way, in regards into the Middle East. Israel has six countries where they have diplomatic relations. I want to be honest with you. I think these 6 Arab nations, they need to go ahead and dissolve their diplomatic relations with Israel. Not just because Israel attacked Iran, but because of how they're acting with, the conflict in Gaza, with the war in Gaza. I forgot to mention, not only is they're restricting UN aid into Gaza for all those Palestinians there, but there's also the plan to relocate Palestinians, to remove them off their lands, attacking Lebanon, attacking Syria. I feel that the Arab nations there have to see that, Israel is not for peace in the region right now with Netanyahu in charge. And they should go ahead and dissolve those diplomatic ties that they have with Israel. And we're going to get to where you say, well, where's the basis for that? Well, actually, in the treaties that they signed with Israel, there's this language in there in regards to them, in regards to Israel being a peaceful neighbor, a stabilizing force in the region. And if that's not happening, then those Arab countries need to also look within the region and also their other allies to see that, you know what, Israel is not acting in good faith here. They're not acting in good faith in regards to the treaties that we signed. So we're going to go ahead. Maybe you just suspend them. I would say dissolve them, but you can go ahead and suspend them. That's another way. But let me go ahead and read you some of these countries. So Egypt is one that has ties with Israel. They condemned it as a dangerous escalation. Jordan, it's a flagrant breach of law. The United Arab Emirates, condemned, urged restraint. Bahrain, strong condemnation. Morocco, a likely condemnation. Now I took this a while ago. There's no official word. There probably is now. And Sudan has a lot of things going on within its own in its own country now and borders. So there's no public statement yet. But likely they are, in the same line as the other countries. So you say, okay, you've made a really good point as to Israel or Netanyahu being this really loose cannon, this destabilizing force in the Middle East. So why does it bother them so much if Iran were to have a nuclear weapon? And like I told you before in this podcast, I'm going to keep it balanced. So, right now, North Korea has a nuclear weapon. And perhaps there's some fear that the United States didn't move fast enough then to prevent North Korea from having a nuclear weapon. And now, South Korea is obviously in danger because of that. And Iran has said some really frightening and unfortunate statements about Israel and also the United States. But here are some. You will not see the next 25 years, God willing, there will be no Zionist regime by the next 25 years. Now, this was the Ayatollah. I don't know which one, but this is when they were in power. It might have been, I don't know, but I think it's actually this supreme leader now. In a televised Quds Day speech, he called Israel a deadly cancerous growth. It will undoubtedly be uprooted and destroyed. So you can understand why when you have statements like that and you could possibly have capabilities for a nuclear bomb, why Israel would be concerned. But again, Iran has said they're not using their nuclear program to build a nuclear bomb. There's no sign of that in regards to their enrichment. So there's no reason to go ahead and to actually bomb Iran. See, the problem is, if Netanyahu was really doing this because he was afraid of the nuclear capabilities, without Iran being at 90%, don't you think Iranians know that? So when Israel goes ahead and bombs them before, all you're doing is giving more energy and proof to what the supreme leader is saying about Israel. You're not helping that conversation. You're not providing any evidence to show the contrary. There is this celebration, or maybe this, commemoration or commendation. I can't think of the right word, but it's on the last Friday of the holy month of Ramadan. Now, this isn't celebrated in all of the Arab nations. It's called Quds Day, which stands for, I guess, Jerusalem, which is the third holiest city in Islam. Now, it's become really vitriolic and, very incendiary. It's, on this day they say death to Israel, death to the United States. What's interesting here is, and of course I don't condone that at all, by the way. As a Muslim myself, I don't condone that. But I want to read to you the original declaration from the Ayatollah Khomeini on what this day was supposed to be. It says, I invite Muslims all over the globe to consecrate the last Friday of the holy month of Ramadan as Quds Day, and to proclaim the international solidarity of Muslims in support of the legitimate right of the Muslim people of Palestine. Now, when you just hear that, that sounds fantastic. That sounds great. It's during Ramadan, the most holiest time for Muslims. A lot of prayer, salah, dua. How it turned into what it is now, I don't know. I don't want to go into the Iranian politics and how that happened. But it would be great to see it move back to that. What I'm trying to tell you is that, there is some reason as to why Israel, has fear about Iran developing a nuclear weapon. But it was nowhere near that. And attacking Iran now only gives, the supreme leader more narrative and the Iranians there that, Israel's this violent nation. I mean, whatever they're saying. And again, I think it's really in regards to the leadership. You have to look at who's in control, who's in power. Netanyahu, he tried to dissolve the Supreme Court. He's fired his, his cabinet. And now he's acting like a loose cannon in the Middle East. And that's why I think it would be a really strong statement if those 6 Arab nations would go ahead and, revoke those diplomatic ties it has with Israel. Or would dissolve those diplomatic ties it has with Israel. There's trade going on there now. It would really impact Israel. And those there who are not supportive of Netanyahu might rise up and say, look, we've worked really hard to try and get normalization within the Middle East. We have these 6 countries that we have normalization with. We're having trade, and now all of that's lost because we have this loose cannon as a prime minister who is setting the Middle East in flames. The world is on fire right now. Ukraine, the Middle East. You talk about the Middle East, there's Gaza, there's now Iran and Iran and Israel. India and Pakistan it got very tense there. There was fire exchange between both countries. It's a very scary time we're living in right now. I want to read to you some of what, these other countries have said. Jordan's King Abdullah II addressed the EU Parliament. And what he said was really great. It was really impactful. He says, there is no telling where the boundaries of this battleground will end. The attacks in Iran threaten a dangerous escalation in our region and beyond. If our global community fails to act decisively, we become complicit in what it means to be human. If Israel bulldozers continue to illegally demolish Palestinian borders, olive trees, and infrastructures, so too will they flatten the rails that defy moral grounds. He continues by saying, global security won't be assured until the global community acts to end the 3-year war in Ukraine and the world's longest and most destructive flashpoint, the 8-decade-long Palestinian-Israel conflict. He's absolutely right. Which is why I told you just a second ago, the world's on fire. The United Arab Emirates warns against miscalculated actions in Israeli-Iranian conflict and calls for an immediate ceasefire. To which Donald Trump says he doesn't want a ceasefire. He wants an unconditional surrender. Donald, why are you always so strong when it comes to Iran and our allies with trade, but you won't do this with Russia? Still mind-boggling. You're not asking for Russia to go ahead and unconditionally stop their war. It's incredible. Why don't you listen to one of your allies, the UAE? That's the foreign minister, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan, I believe. Those who are close to the region, and listen to them when they say, let's start with a ceasefire. What these other Arab countries are telling you is that this shouldn't have happened. It didn't need to happen. And now they're worrying about this dangerous escalation that might end up impacting their countries. There have been 3 major treaties that occurred with Israel to normalize relations with them, with these 6 different countries. The Abraham Accords, the Camp David Accords, and the Wadi Araba Agreement. The Camp David Accords is with Egypt. That was the first one in 79, I believe. The Wadi Araba Agreement, which was in Jordan in 1994. And then there was the Abraham Accords in 2020. The Abraham Accords is a great name because it's talking about how, these are the Abrahamic religions. They all point to Abraham as their father. But what's very clear is there's language in these accords, in these treaties, that talks about how Israel is supposed to conduct itself in the Middle East. And I would say that they, right now, under Netanyahu's leadership, are violating it. Not just in spirit, but also in the letter. I know we're coming up on the hour. So we're at 50 minutes right now. So I have so much here more to tell you. But I want to go ahead and just give you snippets of this. And perhaps what I'll do is I'll share the rest of these on the Facebook page so you can read them. But this goes to show you, here are some of the things that Israel has signed up to. And you tell me if you think Israel, under Netanyahu's leadership, is actually doing this. This is an Abraham Accord declaration. So this is what the Abraham Accords. We believe that the best way to address challenges is through cooperation and dialogue. Where is the cooperation and dialogue with Netanyahu? And that developing friendly relations among states advances the cause of lasting peace in the Middle East and around the world. Fail, Netanyahu! We pursue a vision of peace, security, and prosperity in the Middle East and around the world. Fail, Netanyahu! We affirm the importance of maintaining and strengthening peace in the Middle East and around the world based on mutual understanding and coexistence, as well as respect for human dignity and freedom. Yes, mutual understanding and coexistence, as long as we will relocate Palestinians off their lands to Egypt and Jordan. Fail, Netanyahu! Let me go ahead now and read from the Wadi Araba Agreement. And there are so many excerpts, by the way. I'm just giving you a few. The parties shall cooperate in the prevention of hostile activities. Hostile activities? Oh, you mean like bombing all of the Arab countries around us? And in the suppression of terrorism. They shall prevent the use of their territory for any hostile activities against the other party. Fail, Netanyahu! This is the United Arab Emirates and Israel peace agreement. The parties shall recognize and respect each other's sovereignty and right to live in peace and security. Develop friendly relations of cooperation between them and their people and settle all disputes between them by peaceful means. Fail, Netanyahu! Now you might say, well, that's actually directly towards the UAE. Okay. How about then, the parties shall attach profound importance to mutual understanding, cooperation, and coordination as a means for enhancing peace and stability in the Middle East as a whole. Uh-oh. Guess what, Netanyahu? Fail, Netanyahu. I mean, my gosh. It definitely shows how those 6 Arab nations could suspend their relations, their diplomatic relations with Israel, or they could sever them altogether. I want to give you one more. There are so many. But this one, let me give you a course from the Camp David Accords. Let me find it here. Egypt and Israel undertake not to resort to the threat or the use of force to settle disputes. Any disputes should be settled by peaceful means in accordance with the provision of Article 33 of the Charter of the United Nations. Oh, you mean that Netanyahu should actually follow the Charter of the United Nations? What a concept! Finally, the Bahrain-Israel Declaration. To pursue a more secure and prosperous future, where states focus on shared interests and building a better future. Doesn't that sound good, Israel? Yeah? Well, go ahead and dissolve the Knesset, which is your parliament, so you could have elections and remove Netanyahu from office so that can happen. Focused on shared interests in building a better future, they agreed to eschew threats and the use of force, as well as advance coexistence and a culture of peace. Fail, Netanyahu! There's no culture of peace with Netanyahu at the helm. It's a culture of war. The Middle East is on fire. Started by Hamas with the terrorist attack, and now continued by Netanyahu. There is one truth among all other truths. Whatever you hate, you become. Guarantee it. So, you're like, that was heavy. Where's the funny stories, bro? We're getting there. And unfortunately, we're going to be past the hour. You're like, but I think I have you. So it doesn't matter. We're going to do an hour and 10 minutes. And it will be an hour and 10 minutes. Last time I think it was I said an hour and 10 and it went an hour and 15. And I do. I mean, what we talked about was really heavy. And I do right now, I want to go into the funny stories. But we do need to talk about this issue because it was a heavy week. It was a heavy week. And, the last issue I want to bring up before we get to the funny stories is that about the assassinations of the Minnesota lawmakers. That was Representative Miss Melissa Hortman and Senator John Hoffman. I mean, again, the world's on fire. And, I don't want to sound flippant when I say this, but you might say, okay, well, compared to a war, and this is where utilitarianism, if you know what that means, fails, because all violence is horrible. But, there's a tinderbox right now in the Middle East, in Ukraine, and it's like, why do you want to just focus on these assassinations? Yes, they're horrible, but, why can't we, why is it being such a focus? Because in the United States alone, there have been 4 assassination attempts this year. 2 on President Trump, and now 2 that succeeded. That's 4 in a year. That seems like a lot, doesn't it? You're like, I never thought of it that way. We're like a developed country. You shouldn't be having that many assassination attempts on political figures. Now, if you're like me, or if you're like, an average person, you see the news talk about like, and I'm just going to use it as an example. It's not only here, but, maybe there was an assassination attempt or an assassination completion or success. Really weird. Like, I don't know how to say that because I'm not used to saying that. Assassination completion, assassination success. Odd. But, you hear it like in Latin America. Maybe in Africa. Maybe somewhere, I don't know. Some other place in the world. And I didn't mean to single those two out. But I'm just trying to make a point that it seems like when I look in the media, it talks about that. Right? Like in those places. But you would never get the sense that in America, if you're a politician or an activist, you got to worry about being assassinated. Now, maybe those who are activists are like, oh, no, we know. And you're like, well, now you're just being hyperbolic. But I'm not, because I've done my research. And I'll bring it to you in the next podcast. But I did this in one of those prequel podcasts. And you're like, what's a prequel podcast? Those are the ones that I did in the United Kingdom, where I just gave it a go. I did a test run to see if I had a knack for this and if I liked it. And you know what? When I heard what I had recorded back, I liked it. And I thought, you know what? Let's give it a go. And this was I did this podcast after the assassination attempts on President Trump. And I started thinking to myself, well, look, I forget his name, Antonio Scalise had been shot. Then there's President Reagan. And then, you know what, and I just started thinking of like other, there was John Wilkes Booth, on Lincoln. And I mean, I didn't use that one, but I just started thinking, it seems to maybe this is more prominent than I would think. I was thinking of activists, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evans, Malcolm X. So I did some research, and I'm not kidding you, since the 60s, I don't have the exact number, but somewhere in the 40s, there have been 40 assassination attempts or completions since 1960. 40. That comes out to every year and a half, there's an assassination attempt on a political activist or a politician. That's way too damn high. I'm going to say it. For a developed country, my God. So I did a comparison. I compared it with Argentina. 14. That seems more right. What am I trying to tell you? This is an issue we need to look at. We talked about how freedom of speech in the top of the show, how it's one of our most treasured rights. And how those people who are exercising it, whether in office or protesting to try and create legislation for the issues that they feel are important, are at risk of being assassinated in apparently a free country. Now, it is a free country. I mean, I'm able to talk about these issues and I don't have to worry about, getting raided or being arrested for speaking my mind. But it's just alarming. It is. So I hope this doesn't just go under the radar. I hope we just don't forget. And I saw or I heard a piece on, I believe it was on NPR, where they're talking about how they're thinking right now they're having hearings in the Senate, I believe it was the Senate, in regards to the security for those in the Capitol or for those politicians, and thinking of maybe increasing the funding of the Capitol Police. I think they should. I mean, we're not even talking about the insurrection that occurred. There was a couple officers there that died. The world's on fire, people. It really is. So with that now, we'll go to funny stories. Because, my gosh, if the world's on fire, then you got to have some levity, right? You got to have a little bit of humor because it's not, the way life is, my friends, is that, you know what? We do look at these glaring issues, but they're not the only thing in this world. They're not the only thing in this life. And if we don't look at those other things either, it will go ahead and burn us out. It will impact our mood. So we need laughter. We need to go to the beach, go for a hike, take a bath, get a massage, stream some shows, listen to some music, go dancing, whatever. So I'm going to bring you the story of Cowboy Cody, and then we're going to go to Paranormal Beliefs. And we're going to go over an hour and 10 minutes. But you know what? I don't want to just leave you with all that heaviness. Let's talk about Cowboy Cody. I want to know how he got his nickname. Because I'm pretty sure he didn't get it the way that Cool Hand Luke got it. Or Billy the Kid. Cowboy Cody was arrested by the authorities after apparently he was intoxicated and he released that raccoon in the bar. Now you're saying it was the raccoon his pet and he was drunk and then, started running around? That would be the positive or this, the good way of looking at it. The hopeful way of looking at it. But no, that isn't how it happened. The way it happened is he's actually been banned from the bar because apparently back in December, this by the way is reported by WDKY TV, Cowboy Cody, and his name is Mason, had been arrested, and the bar's name is Tap 216, which I guess I'm going to have to check out now if I ever go to Kentucky. He had been drinking, and he was riding a mule. Apparently, he started whipping a bullwhip at other patrons. What the heck, bro? Do you think you're trying to get all those cows back into the corral? What were you doing? Were you having a flashback of some sort? Did you just finish watching Indiana Jones or something? What the heck was this guy doing? He was asked to leave, obviously. I hope so. I hope he was asked to leave if he's riding a mule and he's bullwhipping people. That's not going to be good for your business, by the way. He refused. And so, thank God we have officers, he was arrested. So they obviously were aware of Cowboy Cody when they got the call, I'm sure. They're like, oh, it's Mason again? Or maybe not. I shouldn't speak for them. I don't know. But apparently he went to go back into the bar. And I guess Mary Hafner, who's a bartender at the bar, she went to go talk to him. And this is her speaking to the Post. She says he lives alone on a farm. I wonder why he lives alone. Oh! Well, apparently he has a raccoon and a mule. Oh! That's not... Okay, I'm sorry. I feel a little bad now. Anyways, he lives alone on a farm. And it's called trouble at local bars in the past. Okay, I don't feel bad anymore. Cowboy Cody, there is help for people who drink too much. Okay? There are 12 steps groups. Check them out. She said Mason had already been drinking when he turned up at the bar that day. And of course, he was banned due to the previous incident with the mule and the bullwhipping. So Mary goes out to meet him, and he says, oh, I see how it is. They sent a pretty face out to distract me. So, apparently he left. He listened to Mary. But then he returned back into the bar, opened the door and said, "Surprise!" and threw a raccoon in there. I don't know if he said surprise. I'm making that part up. I think he said, "Go get him, Bobo!" Are there names for raccoons? I've been noticing in these animation movies, like, animation cartoons or, Disney films and the equivalent DreamWorks and what's the other one? I don't know. Imagination, whatever those companies are that do animated cartoons for us. I've been seeing raccoons being more present, as if they're trying to, make us, see the raccoon as friendly. By the way, I have not met a friendly raccoon ever. Now, I could be wrong, and let me continue with the story, because I want to bring that point home with raccoon. How I've never met a friendly one. Mary Hafner said when Bobo, I don't know if his name's Bobo, we're going to call him Bobo. When Bobo was thrown into the bar by Cowboy Cody, it was more scared than anything. Aww. Hafner told the publication that another employee attempted to apprehend the raccoon by grabbing it by its tail. Well, that isn't very smart. And was consequently bitten by the animal. Uh-oh, which requires a rabies shot. Yeah, man, you got to be careful for raccoons. She's saying that it was more scared than anything. I would be scared just because I know you got rabies, bro, and I don't want rabies. But apparently Mary knew what to do. She was able to corner the raccoon with a towel and then safely returned it outside. She told the Post, "I'm no city slicker. I'm a Kentucky girl. I had no problem catching him." Well, Mary, I'm a city slicker. I would have no idea what the hell to do with Bobo. Let me give you my story of my own personal Bobo. My experience. I was living in St. Louis, Missouri, for those in the Midwest. Because they say Missouri, not Missouri. And we always we lived on the third floor, and we take the trash and we leave it on the fire escape. Because, in the Midwest, you can, walk down the fire escape. I guess you could do it in New York, too, so maybe some places in the East. And so we'd leave if it was at nighttime, we'd take the trash out there. And in the morning, when we're going to work, this is when I was married, we take it down to the dumpster, to the bin, as we say for my United Kingdom folk, or mates. Well, one morning, I went out, and there was a raccoon, going through the garbage. And I was just like, well, look, I'll just go ahead and grab a broom, I'll make some noise, and the raccoon will leave. Now, how did I come up with that idea? Because I know with bears, if you just make some noise, they go away. I know that because in California, there's a beautiful national park not too far from where I live, like 3 hours north, called Yosemite. By the way, if you ever visit California, you have to go to Yosemite. It's gorgeous. There's nothing like it in the world. And we were on top of this waterfall. I'm not kidding you. Vernell Waterfall. And this little brown bear was approaching us. He just made a little noise with some stick on the rock and it went away. No big deal. So I thought for sure if a bear would run away from the noise, surely a raccoon would, right? It didn't. It hissed at me. And it got really beady-eyed. And I was like, what's going on, bro? I mean, I guess maybe he hadn't eaten in a while. I don't know. But I was like, you got to get off this garbage because I got to pick it up and take it to the dumpster or the landlord's going to be pissed. So I started banging harder. Went, shh. It was, I guess, vile? I don't know the right word. Finally, as I got closer, kept banging it. It slowly backed down the causeway, not the causeway, back down the fire escape, back down the steps. So I don't know. I mean, that's why I'm saying, I see these cartoons with these raccoons are all friendly. I've never met a friendly raccoon. And, I guess we need more Mary Hafners who aren't city slickers who know how to get them back outside. So, and that happened to me in the Midwest. And you hear about, in the Midwest, not just in the Midwest, but in other places, you hear about possibly encounters with, the third kind. Dun, 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 dun. From that movie, which means we're getting into the final part of the funny segments, which are the paranormal beliefs in regards to what Americans believe in. Now, I came and be like, well, why'd you say the Midwest? Because of the movie Signs, if you haven't seen it. I think there's they do signs in big cornfields, right? And of course in Arizona, which is not the Midwest, don't get offended, Arizona. There's Area 59 or 50 something. Where apparently there's all this, alien technology. I don't know. This is what the stories say. So I'm going to ask people here. Do you feel that aliens have visited Earth in our ancient past? I'm going to be honest with you. I think they have. And it says aliens have come to Earth in modern times. I think they have too. I just do. Look at this. How big is this universe? How big is the galaxy? My gosh, how could there not be aliens? How could there not be other life form? When you say aliens, all you mean is other life form, right? But let me give you these other categories. So again, places can be haunted by spirits. Ancient advanced civilizations such as Atlantis once existed. Give me a break. An underwater empire? An underwater city? What, like Poseidon's? Nah, that can't be real. Let's see. Some people can move objects with their minds. The Stranger Things. Bigfoot is a real creature. Now, nobody has to believe that one, right? That better be a 0%. There shouldn't be a single American who believes in Bigfoot. Give me a break. And fortune tellers and psychics can foresee the future. Unfortunately, I believe there are people who actually believe this. So what do you think? Which one do you think is the highest one? Places can be haunted by spirits? Ancient civilizations like Atlantis existed? Aliens in the past? Aliens now? You can move objects with your mind? Bigfoot's real? Fortune tellers and psychics can foresee the future. Well, I'm going to tell you, the ones who Americans who believe, or they strongly agree and agree, the one they strongly agree and agree with the most is that places can be haunted by spirits. That's really fascinating to me. I did not think that, I don't know. I talk with people who watch those ghost hunter shows. They don't believe they're real. But, apparently people, people believe in the paranormal and other phenomenon. That's 58% of Americans who strongly agree that places can be haunted by spirits. And here's what's really weird. 57% believes in ancient advanced civilizations such as Atlantis. Come on! You can't really believe that. Apparently. But here's the thing. This is such as Atlantis. I don't know if this is just how the meme is describing it, and they had said some other examples of other advanced civilizations. But I don't know. What would that be? Cloud City? Like in Star Wars? And then next is aliens visiting the ancient past. And then following that is aliens who've come to Earth in modern times. And rounding out the last three. Oh, I should give you the percentages. So 57% believe in ancient civilizations. 41% believe aliens have visited in the ancient past. 35% believe aliens have come to Earth in modern times. 26% believe in stranger things, that people can move objects with their minds. Yeah, well, if that's the case, why don't we see it more? 1 in 4 Americans believe this? Come on, man. No way. That would be cool, though. Can you imagine if you had Stranger Things powers, or for those who follow X-Men, Jean Grey? It'd be incredible. Here's what's really incredible to me. 21% believe Bigfoot's a real creature. Come on. Bigfoot is not real, people. I hate to disappoint you. There's no Bigfoot. None. It does not exist. It's like saying the Loch Ness Monster exists. No Loch Ness Monster, no Bigfoot. You say yes, there is. Yeah, well then Santa Claus exists too. And finally, 17% believe fortune tellers and psychics can foresee the future. Well, if that's the case, then why don't these fortune tellers and psychics play the stock market? I'll tell you why. Because they can't read the future. That's why. Well, there you go. Way over the hour. Another 20 minutes over. I don't care. One show. We will get back to the hour. But it was definitely worth it. We had big stories we had to bring to you. We had to go ahead and to elaborate as to the importance of those stories. And of course, we had to end it with some levity. How do you feel now? Hopefully a lot better. I hope I ended you on a high note. Thank you for listening to El Maestro. We will talk to you in a couple days. Oh, and that's a reminder. Our next podcast will actually be the interview. There will not be another headline culture piece podcast. The next one will be the interview. And I hope you enjoy that. Until then, stay lit.